On her 16th birthday, a young girl was suddenly informed she had a fiancé? Yonomori woke up to her mother and sister telling her that her grandfather had chosen a good young man for her. He is the grandson of a comrade at arms, and since his parents were abroad, he was arranged to stay at Yonomori's home. Byakuya, though handsome, is quiet and unobtrusive. He mentions that people around him often say they will end up together. Yonomori cannot accept an arranged marriage, but she is gentle and considers that Byakuya too was forced into this arrangement by his parents, so she refrains from blaming him too much. Byakuya did not come alone. His sister, Mashiro, also moved in. Yonomori's sister, Kurenai-cho, was thrilled, exclaiming about the adorable tsundere little girl. Yonomori was overwhelmed, her only concern being that 2 more people meant not enough food. She put on a coat and was about to go shopping when she nearly fell, but Byakuya caught her, earnestly telling her it was dangerous to go out alone. He stressed that she was important to him and that he wanted to protect her, offering to help carry things. Hesitant at first, Yonomori agreed, as they indeed needed supplies. During their trip, Byakuya bumped his knee against an advertisement, looking somewhat dazed. Yonomori's mother hinted that Byakuya and she used to be friends, but Yonomori had an accident as a child and lost her memories from before that. Feeling guilty, Yonomori blushed and punched him in the face when Byakuya patted her head. As for Mashiro, she came to assess the hygiene situation, but was warned by Kurenai-cho not to bother her beloved sister, or she would play with Mashiro harshly. When Yonomori returned with Byakuya, Mashiro hid behind her brother, shocked to find Byakuya had been punched, thinking it was domestic violence. Clearing up the misunderstanding, Mashiro explained that Byakuya often speaks his mind, which can lead to misunderstandings. In their hometown, arranged marriages are normal, and Byakuya had always been raised as Yonomori's intended. Thinking Yonomori was making curry, she silently put away the red wine she had intended for beef stew. The curry turned out spicy, making Mashiro stick out her tongue, while Byakuya quietly ate. Considering their long stay, Yonomori asked about their food preferences. Mashiro listed a few dislikes but said she could manage, while Byakuya claimed he would eat anything Yonomori made, leaving her flustered. The next day, Mashiro reminded Byakuya about traffic lights, which made Yonomori wonder if they were really that isolated. Seeing their silence, she dropped the subject. Now attending the same school, Yonomori led Byakuya, initially hiding the fact he was her fiancé. However, her friend Momonai found out, knowing it was a match made by Yonomori's grandfather, who was very authoritative at home. Yonomori reluctantly informed Byakuya, telling him not to mention the fiancé matter at school to avoid ridicule. Byakuya obediently agreed, and to Yonomori's surprise, both he and Mashiro were placed in her class. Yonomori joked about Mashiro looking like a primary school student, puzzled at how the teacher agreed to her transfer. Mashiro smiled, hinting at their family's influence. Just then, Yonomori's sister passed by, a goddess-like figure at school despite her odd obsession at home. Mashiro finds it unbelievable that Kurenai-cho is so poised, performs well academically, and is articulate. Because Kurenai-cho excels at school, people often compare Yonomori to her sister. Yonomori is proud to have such a sister but admits it can be exhausting. Byakuya notices her inner thoughts, so when Yonomori is alone, he gently pats her head and reassures her that she is fine just as she is. All the while, Mashiro clings to Byakuya. Mashiro still can't believe that the Kurenai-cho at school is the same person as the one at home. Currently, Kurenai-cho is tempting Mashiro with snacks to lure her into working at the school's student council. Mashiro is tempted by the treats, but still resists the peculiar Kurenai-cho. Yonomori asks Kurenai-cho how Mashiro managed to transfer to high school and about their family's background. Kurenai-cho isn't sure, only knowing that Byakuya's family has a long history, and she is quite content with having a young girl in high school. Mashiro sneaks upstairs and accidentally breaks Byakuya's block structure, then encourages Byakuya to talk more with Yonomori. Unsure of what to discuss, Byakuya hesitates. Yonomori notices Mashiro looking up snacks on her phone and sees her genuine craving. Yonomori offers to bake snacks for her next time. Since Yonomori's mother is busy and her sister is not good at cooking, Yonomori handles all the household chores and cooking. Mashiro enjoys Yonomori's homemade burger, commenting on how delicious it is and mentioning they used to eat more traditional Japanese food at home. She casually brings up past events, but Byakuya quickly interrupts, seemingly hiding something. Mashiro questions Byakuya about why he's hiding the past incident, where he was seriously injured while saving Yonomori, who does not remember it. Byakuya feels he failed to protect her. Mashiro insists it wasn't his fault but just an accident. Byakuya doesn't want to coerce Yonomori into marriage by making her feel indebted, so he keeps quiet about his injury to avoid making Yonomori feel guilty. Downstairs, Yonomori is still puzzled about Mashiro's school transfer. Finding it odd, no one thinks it's strange for a primary school student to be in middle school. She decides to ask Byakuya about it. At that moment, Mashiro gets scared by an alien on TV, knocks over Byakuya's structure again, and bumps into Yonomori at the door. Seeing how frightened Mashiro is of aliens, Yonomori gives her a glass of milk. Mashiro, hearing that aliens are famous worldwide, suddenly feels surrounded by danger. Yonomori fails to learn about the past, as her memories before the accident are only fragments. She recalls going hiking with her grandfather and seeing a large house and a small animal in the mountains, but can't remember more. Knowing Byakuya likely won't disclose much, Yonomori tries to ask Mashiro what happened. Mashiro panics and runs away, tripping in her haste. Seeing her avoid the question, Yonomori decides not to press further, and instead applies a bandage to Mashiro. Byakuya is already asleep at his desk. Yonomori and others start discussing dieting. Momonai remembers that everything Yonomori eats seems to end up enlarging her bust, to which Mashiro reacts with envy. Yonomori quickly reassures her, saying having a large bust isn't all that great. It makes clothes look bulky and running tiring. At that moment, Kurenai Cho strolls by and tells Mashiro, "Being flat has its perks. How else would you conquer the world if not flat-chested?" When Kurenai Cho appears, her fanboys and fangirls follow. Mashiro thinks Kurenai Cho is like the legendary aliens who brainwash students. But Yonomori says Kurenai Cho is impressive. Even the school newspaper records her achievements in both sports and academics, and she serves as the student council president. Mashiro finds it unbelievable how perfect one person can be, and suspects Kurenai Cho has clones. Kurenai Cho states her lifelong dream was to be a sister, and Yonomori has always cooperated with her, even adapting her ways of addressing her with age. Momonai remarks that Byakuya should then start calling Kurenai Cho sister too. Kurenai Cho says having a sister is enough, no need for a brother just yet. Only the student council vice president Kashima can handle the increasingly bizarre Kurenai Cho. Momonai quietly asks Mashiro if they're living at Yonomori's house. Mashiro nods and replies loudly, attracting attention from those around them. Fortunately, their marital status remains undisclosed, and people just envy them for living with Kurenai Cho. Kurenai Cho mentions she had a wonderful dream recently. At breakfast, she starts to tell Mashiro, who refuses to listen, dismissing it as nonsense. Byakuya quickly pulls her away. Yonomori asks Byakuya if he likes the breakfast, or if he wants something different. Byakuya says anything made by Yonomori is delicious. Kurenai Cho nearby senses a romantic vibe and feels uneasy. Mashiro enjoys Western-style snacks. When she hears Yonomori plans to make some on her day off tomorrow, she's thrilled all day, but then runs into a physical fitness test. Yonomori admits she's not good at sports. Momonai looks at her bust and shakes his head, suggesting it's a disadvantage. By then, Byakuya has already completed his fitness test. Other boys in the class don't know how to react when they meet Byakuya's gaze. Momonai tells Mashiro that Yonomori is actually quite popular at school, but she doesn't feel it because of her accomplished sister. What puzzles Momonai is that Kurenai Cho, a notorious sister lover, agreed to let Byakuya be Yonomori's fiancé, which seems unbelievable to those who know them. After considering Kurenai Cho and her own brother, Mashiro cautiously holds on to Yonomori's clothes hem and says her brother may not be much, but he is obedient and hopes Yonomori won't mind him. Mashiro observes Yonomori and finds she is indeed popular in class. She is gentle, caring, and a good cook. Not to mention she's physically attractive and excels academically. If Yonomori truly isn't interested in Byakuya, Mashiro worries how Byakuya would cope. Therefore, Mashiro encourages Byakuya to put more effort into winning over his wife. Mashiro even accepted an invitation for tea from the student council. Momonai, who is very perceptive, mentioned he had tutoring in the afternoon. So after school, only Yonomori and Byakuya were left to walk home together. Knowing Byakuya is usually quiet, Yonomori wasn't sure what to talk about. She mentioned she needed to buy ingredients for baking snacks and suggested Byakuya go home first. However, Byakuya insisted on accompanying her, saying he couldn't let her be alone or carry heavy items. Yonomori found Byakuya odd at times, but not a bad person, and decided to just go with the flow. Kurenai Cho from the student council watched Mashiro eating snacks and felt healed both physically and mentally, quickly finishing her work. Meanwhile, Byakuya accompanied Yonomori to the mall where a crowd was scrambling for sale items. Byakuya asked Yonomori to wait outside and soon returned looking disheveled with the products. Seeing his pitiful state, Yonomori told him to wait outside while she bought new bowls and chopsticks for him and Mashiro, which Mashiro seemed to really like. The next morning, Yonomori found Kurenai Cho in her bed, but was used to it and went to the bathroom. Kurenai Cho felt a sense of loss and then bragged to Mashiro about how cute her sister was. While Mashiro disapproved of Kurenai Cho, she danced along with the TV. At that moment, Byakuya pulled out an arrow, saying a letter had arrived from home. Mashiro then said she needed to reply. As she went downstairs, she smelled the sweet scent of snacks. Yonomori brought out the freshly baked treats, which Mashiro joyfully ate. She noticed Byakuya also ate sweets, which he usually doesn't do. Yonomori remembered Byakuya saying he loves anything she makes, which made her blush. Yonomori quietly approached Kurenai Cho, asking why she usually opposed her having boyfriends, but not Byakuya. Kurenai Cho felt happy, thinking Yonomori was seeking her sisterly care. However, she revealed the truth. Years ago, their family visited Byakuya's home. Yonomori fell from a cliff, and Byakuya saved her. To some extent, Byakuya was Yonomori's lifesaver, and the engagement was arranged by their grandfather. Even if Kurenai Cho was unhappy, she couldn't refuse. She wasn't present at the time, but knew Byakuya also fell trying to save Yonomori. They were both seriously injured, but Byakuya managed to climb up and alert the adults, which helped save Yonomori. Remembering her indifferent attitude towards Byakuya, Yonomori felt a pang of guilt. Yonomori was conflicted, thinking she should apologize to Mashiro. But first, she felt she needed to thank Byakuya for saving her life. Caught in her dilemma, Yonomori fell ill with a fever. Kurenai Cho told Mashiro about the past events, shocking her as Byakuya had intended to keep the truth hidden. Kurenai Cho said some things can't be kept secret forever. Originally, it was Kurenai Cho who was supposed to go up the mountain with their grandfather, but she wanted to hang out with friends, so Yonomori went instead. The accident happened, and Kurenai Cho has felt guilty ever since. Yonomori, getting up, said it wasn't her sister's fault, and was then tucked back into bed. The Mashiro siblings looked at the terrible dinner on the table. Mashiro realized that some things are only cherished after they are lost. Kurenai Cho called Kashima, discussing the past, and for once, Kashima didn't hang up, but offered some comforting words. Meanwhile, the feverish Yonomori began recalling some memories from after her fall, including something fuzzy being near her. Yonomori couldn't go to school due to her fever. Byakuya wanted to stay and care for her, but Kurenai Cho objected, citing it inappropriate for an unmarried couple to be alone. She planned to stay instead, but Yonomori insisted they both go to school. Byakuya kept looking back as he left. After hearing about the situation, Mom and I first fed Mashiro and noticed Byakuya was unusually downcast. Lying in bed, Yonomori, who often missed activities due to poor health, was quickly visited by the Mashiro siblings after school. Mashiro wiped her sweat and noticed scars on her back. Yonomori mentioned the scars were from falling off a cliff, and she had been unconscious for a month afterward. When Mashiro opened the door, she found Byakuya standing there. Yonomori, half-jokingly, said Byakuya was like a big dog, which made Mashiro look bemused. Once Yonomori recovered from her fever, she felt very guilty seeing Byakuya. Misinterpreting her tears as reluctance to be with him, Byakuya panicked and disappeared like a whirlwind. Mashiro hurriedly explained that they come from a mountainous region where everyone runs fast. Yonomori quickly chased after him. Byakuya thought Yonomori disliked him, but she caught up to apologize, explaining she felt guilty for his injuries and didn't remember the incident. She wanted to thank him for saving her life. Byakuya smiled for the first time, which embarrassed Yonomori. Meanwhile, Kurenai Cho at school suddenly felt uneasy, fearing her cabbage was about to be taken. Mashiro, with her backpack, came by and mentioned she had manipulated the schedule so the first class was a study period. She accidentally let slip that they had traversed mountains to get there, hinting at their extraordinary nature. Momonai, learning that Byakuya was Yonomori's lifesaver, felt this was destined fate and was enthusiastic about supporting their relationship. Kurenai-cho bought Mashiro a set of pajamas online. Yonomori, curious about Mashiro's age this year, heard Byakuya almost slip up before he corrected himself, saying it's rude to ask a girl's age. Yonomori felt he was hiding something, which annoyed her, prompting Byakuya to poke her cheek playfully. Yonomori directly asked Mashiro about her age. Mashiro admitted she was only 10, leading Yonomori to assume that Mashiro must be academically advanced and skipped grades to be in high school. Yonomori expressed confidence in Mashiro's success in her exams the next day. Byakuya mentioned that a letter had arrived at home, indicating that someone would come to check on their situation. Mashiro initially thought they were coming to check on Yonomori, but she realized that Yonomori's excellence might shift the visitor's focus onto her. After the exam, Yonomori planned to take Mashiro to the cafeteria, but found it serving only ingredients Mashiro disliked. Hearing about relatives visiting, Yonomori worried about the food. Momonai implied that if the relatives were accepted, it was almost like approving Byakuya as a fiancé. Kurenai-cho, jealous as a sister lover, couldn't bear the thought of someone taking her sister away. Byakuya tasted the cafeteria noodles and remarked that Yonomori's cooking was much better. Yonomori worried about any dietary restrictions Byakuya's relatives might have. Byakuya reassured her by patting her head. Meanwhile, the visiting relatives had gotten lost. Yonomori and Byakuya were still shopping in the mall. Just as they were about to head home, Yonomori remembered they needed cinnamon. Byakuya offered to help, but didn't recognize cinnamon. Yonomori told him to head home while she finished shopping, and on the way, she met a lost girl who needed directions to a place near her home. Yonomori offered to guide her, not realizing the girl was headed to her own house. When they arrived, Byakuya and Mashiro opened the door. A girl in a kimono greeted them cheerfully. Mashiro, shocked, introduced her as their mother, Shiroi Yuki. Yonomori was stunned, wondering about their father's age due to Shiroi Yuki's youthful appearance. Shiroi Yuki even suggested Yonomori could call her mother. Seeing Kurenai-cho about to serve overly strong coffee to the guest, Yonomori quickly intervened. She discovered Shiroi Yuki had bought many sweets while being lost. Shiroi Yuki was very pleased with Yonomori as a future daughter-in-law, lamenting that their kind was losing living spaces due to urban development. She noted her son had lost half of his powers, making it difficult to find a partner. Mashiro was alarmed, realizing they hadn't disclosed their non-human nature yet. Suddenly, Yonomori remembered seeing a large dog in her childhood. At this point, Kurenai-cho excitedly claimed they must be fairies, suspecting why there were so many youthful-looking individuals. Shiroi Yuki explained that their kind had many names in the human world, sometimes called demons or monsters. Kurenai-cho nonchalantly responded that it didn't matter. They were all her wives anyway. When Byakuya noticed Yonomori seemed to have a headache before he could reach out to her, Kurenai-cho dramatically intervened, suggesting that Yonomori was overwhelmed by the influx of information, joking that her CPU was overheating. Byakuya felt guilty, thinking he was to blame. Shiroi Yuki then took Yonomori aside for a private chat, explaining that Byakuya had been very anxious when Yonomori was injured and had transferred half of his power to her in his desperation. Since it was a non-human power, Yonomori might occasionally feel unwell. Shiroi Yuki felt sorry for the young girl. Her visit was unexpected, primarily to check on her children, and seeing them get along well with Yonomori, she left contentedly, walking on the roof. Later, she secretly returned to Yonomori's room. Yonomori, seeing Shiroi Yuki drop from a height unharmed, realized everything she said was true. Shiroi Yuki whispered to Yonomori that Byakuya was happy when his head was patted, thinking it made people happy. Recalling how Byakuya had patted her head, Yonomori blushed. When Yonomori's mother returned, Kurenai-cho loudly questioned if she knew about Shiroi Yuki. Not believing her mother could be unaware of such a youthful-looking mother, she exclaimed, "Take this sister-loving lolicon away. Our police won't believe her lies." In reality, Yonomori's mother was aware that Mashiro's family was non-human and quickly accepted this fact, grateful to Byakuya for saving her daughter. The next day, Yonomori's mother made breakfast, steaming a large batch of buns. Yonomori realized they used tap water to make them, which dismayed her. Mashiro remarked that aside from Yonomori, no one else in the house could cook, fearing for the family's culinary future. Yonomori curiously asked Mashiro if their true forms were related to dogs. Kurenaicho eagerly anticipated something like the legendary beast-eared girls. However, Mashiro coldly shattered her fantasy, explaining their family could transform but couldn't maintain beast ears in human form. Kurenaicho was devastated, feeling as if the sky had fallen. Yonomori was curious about their original form, but Byakuya refused to transform in front of her, concerned Yonomori might be upset. Surprisingly, Byakuya had the best grades in the class, having nothing better to do than study besides playing with blocks. Yonomori maintained average grades, while Mashiro, thought to have skipped grades, scored only 44. Mashiro explained they had just used their divine powers to blend in and hadn't had much schooling before. Yonomori patted Mashiro's head, encouraging her that with effort, she could truly become a high school student. Byakuya still wouldn't transform in front of Yonomori, but was worried she might be upset. Mashiro told Yonomori that Byakuya disliked showing his true form. Passing by, Momonai reminded them that Valentine's Day was approaching, a time for giving chocolates, and joked that dogs shouldn't eat chocolate. Back in the classroom, Yonomori found Byakuya dozing off and couldn't resist patting his head. Byakuya woke up startled, and realizing her forward gesture, Yonomori, embarrassed, hurried away. Kurenaicho sensed what she called the sour smell of romance again, and started intensely hugging Mashiro. Yonomori hadn't decided what chocolate to give Byakuya, so she would blush and run away whenever she saw him. Byakuya mistakenly thought she was avoiding him, which left him looking quite dejected. At the store, Mashiro learned that Momonai's family was well known in the confectionery industry, practically akin to being from a wealthy corporate family. While making chocolate, Yonomori pondered her situation. She didn't have a romantic interest, and Byakuya was her fiancé in name only. Her mother had raised her and her sister alone, and her sister was very accomplished. Yonomori felt there was nothing to complain about. She wondered, where's the father in this family drama? Could it be a difficult birth? Yonomori asked Kurenaicho if an ordinary girl like her really had to marry as commanded. Kurenaicho asked if Yonomori disliked Byakuya. Yonomori shook her head, and Kurenaicho admitted she didn't really want Yonomori to get married yet, but was excited to see her in a beautiful wedding dress someday. Acknowledging that her sister would grow up and marry eventually, she promised to respect Yonomori's choices. Then she went back to hugging Mashiro. Yonomori distributed chocolates to her family and friends. Mashiro told Yonomori that Byakuya didn't even know it was Valentine's Day and would probably be happy to receive chocolate. Yonomori felt too shy to face Byakuya. Mashiro thought Yonomori was starting to see Byakuya as more than just a friend. Yonomori summoned the courage to ask Byakuya to meet her on the rooftop. Just as she was about to give him the chocolate, she found the rooftop crowded with couples giving out chocolates. The scene was so packed that even the headmaster could have caught them all at once. The atmosphere was awkward, and Yonomori couldn't give her chocolate. Byakuya also realized it was Valentine's Day. On his way back to the classroom, he overheard a classmate saying that not receiving chocolate meant you were disliked. Byakuya felt heartbroken and hid in a corner for a while before going home dejectedly. Mashiro offered him a chocolate blind box he had won, but Byakuya didn't accept it. Yonomori, misunderstanding, thought he hated chocolate and became even more hesitant to give hers. At this time, Momonai learned that Mashiro liked collecting blind boxes. Since the blind boxes weren't very popular, she brought a whole box from home as a gift for Mashiro, and helped Yonomori by asking Byakuya if he had received Yonomori's chocolate. Yonomori quickly handed her chocolate to Byakuya, who was visibly delighted. Mashiro often found Loch Ness monsters in his blind boxes and finally got the UFO he wanted. Yonomori joked that Mashiro's family was as mysterious as UFOs. Mashiro denied any resemblance. After the final exams, Kurenaicho invited Mashiro to go for sweets. Before Mashiro could decline, Konoha, a student council member who admired Kurenaicho, felt jealous. Konoha had a deep admiration for Kurenaicho, having been let out of trouble by her when she first came to town. To get closer to Kurenaicho, Konoha purposely enrolled in the same high school, but was surprised to find Kurenaicho had a sister. She wondered where Mashiro had suddenly come from and secretly observed him daily. even making Mashiro think he had seen a UFO. Ono from the news department noticed Konoha's keen interest in Mashiro and decided to interview Yonemori and her group to investigate Mashiro's background. However, Yonemori was reluctant to be interviewed because she was often compared to her sister, which made her uncomfortable despite getting used to it. Ono left a questionnaire for Yonemori and went straight to question Mashiro about her relationship with Kurenai Cho and if Mashiro had any weaknesses. Konoha, overhearing Ono's blunt inquiries, worried that Kurenai Cho might dislike her for it and quickly pulled Ono away, urging her to stop her investigation. But Ono's competitive spirit was ignited. Meanwhile, Byakuya was escorting Yonemori to the bathroom, having heard from Kurenai Cho that it was dangerous because of Hanako in the toilet. Yonemori, resigned, asked Byakuya to wait outside. Konoha continued to persuade Ono not to investigate Yonemori and Mashiro, but Ono found it strange that Mashiro, just a child, was attending middle school. Byakuya, passing by, took Ono's camera and told them to stay away from Yonemori and Mashiro, then deleted the photos. Byakuya needed to retake a math exam, so Mashiro asked Yonemori to tutor him. Momonai tearfully joined the tutoring session as she also had a retake. While they studied, Ono secretly watched from outside, and Konoha, receiving photos taken by Ono, was shocked. Recently, Mashiro was reading urban legends and, scared by the story of Hanako, blindly rushed to the bathroom. Ono, thinking she was discovered, hid in the toilet in panic and screamed because she ran too fast, leading Mashiro to think she had actually encountered Hanako. Konoha, following and screaming, was discovered by Yonemori, who then asked Kurenai Cho about Konoha. Kurenai Cho described Konoha as looking like a younger sister type, but having the personality of an older sister, turning her into a tragic figure. Mashiro didn't retake the exam because he used his special powers to scrape through. Byakuya, however, believed he should not rely on his powers for academic matters. Yonemori admired Byakuya's integrity. Kurenai Cho insisted on accompanying Mashiro to the bathroom. Konoha, following the vice president's instructions, felt envious and wished she could also have such an intimate moment. Overheard by Yonemori, Konoha felt utterly embarrassed. Later, Mashiro saw Kurenai Cho greeting other students tenderly and complained to Yonemori after school, suspecting Kurenai Cho of using biochemical weapons to control classmates. Konoha, tracking them and feeling envious and jealous, declared she would confront Mashiro. Mashiro smelled a familiar scent on her, but noted Konoha's deep admiration for Kurenai Cho, whom Mashiro considered a pervert. When Mashiro shared how Kurenai Cho treated her, Konoha mistook it for bragging and stormed off in anger. Yonemori was surprised, realizing Konoha might also be non-human. The fleeing Konoha calmed down and suddenly realized that Mashiro, possibly her kin, meant that Byakuya, related as siblings, might also not be human. Momonai lived simply in the mountains, so after moving to the city, she deliberately changed her image. Meanwhile, Yonemori was asking Mashiro if Konoha was really from the same clan and how common their kind was. Mashiro explained that such cases were rare. Most had left the mountains because they couldn't hide their identities, and the city's advanced technology made it more interesting. Mashiro and his siblings weren't familiar with Konoha, who initially didn't recognize them. Kurenai Cho, curious, joined the conversation. Considering that Kurenai Cho and Konoha often met, Yonemori didn't reveal that Konoha and Mashiro were from the same clan. However, Kurenai Cho suspected her sister was keeping secrets, feeling a distance growing between them. Konoha was very worried about Yonemori discovering her screaming outside and telling Kurenai Cho. Seeing Konoha upset, Ono gave her a photo of Kurenai Cho, but before Konoha could thank her, Ono had left. Yonemori, standing in front of Konoha, said she would keep her secret, but Konoha misunderstood, thinking Yonemori had leverage over her. Kurenai Cho was trying to uncover Yonemori's secret, refusing to believe there was any rift between them. She assumed Yonemori was planning a surprise for her. The vice president, however, thought Yonemori might have a romantic interest, noting that it was normal for siblings to have secrets. Kurenai Cho, aware of her own oddities, wouldn't dare share everything with Yonemori. Yonemori and her friends went to buy desserts. Concerned about gaining weight, she shared half her sweets with Byakuya. Ono came over to remind Yonemori to fill out a form. Yonemori didn't want to be interviewed, but Ono left without giving her a chance to refuse. While Yonemori was picking out pants, Ono secretly observed and commented that Yonomori was conscious about her hip size. Byakuya, discovering Ono hiding, earnestly said that Yonomori was fine as she was. Momonai also told Ono that Yonomori disliked being investigated. Ono agreed but ran off and told Konoha that Yonomori was self-conscious about her hips, confusing Konoha. Mashiro struggled to get along with Konoha, finding it unreasonable that she was a fan of Kurenai Cho. Konoha suspected that Mashiro and his siblings were disguising themselves as humans to get closer to Kurenai Cho. As she approached the classroom, she dropped a photo of Kurenai Cho. Mashiro looked at her as if she were a pervert. They agreed to meet on the rooftop, and Byakuya quietly followed them. On the rooftop, Mashiro and Konoha faced off. Passing by, Kurenai Cho thought Mashiro was jealous on her behalf, but the vice president dispelled her illusion and took her away. The wind on the rooftop was so strong that the two could not hear each other. They moved closer to suggest changing locations, and then jumped off the rooftop together, confirming that they were from the same clan. Konoha felt that Mashiro had gone too far, even for a fellow clan member, by disguising his identity to infiltrate Kurenai Cho's home. This deeply upset Mashiro, causing him to lose his composure on the spot. Yonomori was very worried about the situation between the two, and was about to follow them when Kurenai Cho appeared and asked her what had happened. Yonomori told her that it had nothing to do with her sister, which shocked Kurenai Cho so much that she metaphorically spat blood. When Yonomori reached the rooftop, she saw Mashiro crying below, claiming he had nothing to do with Kurenai Cho. Byakuya rushed over, while Sayo suspected Byakuya had feelings for Kurenai Cho. Byakuya recalled the unkind things Kurenai Cho had done at home and felt a headache coming on. Mashiro explained he was only in the city because he was worried about Byakuya, not because of Kurenai Cho. Konoha became upset, criticizing them and claiming they didn't appreciate how excellent Kurenai Cho was. After confirming Byakuya had no romantic interest in Kurenai Cho, Konoha, noting the rarity of meeting someone from the same clan, impulsively asked Byakuya to marry her. Yonomori overheard this. In that moment, Yonomori wanted to pretend she hadn't heard, but she tripped and fell. Embarrassed, she turned to leave, but Byakuya quickly followed her. Mashiro angrily informed Konoha that Yonomori and Byakuya were engaged. Konoha thought Yonomori and Kurenai Cho were also from the same clan, but Mashiro clarified that Kurenai Cho was human. Konoha didn't necessarily want to marry Byakuya. Her family had just advised her to act quickly when meeting a male from their clan. Yonomori mistakenly thought Konoha liked Byakuya. Byakuya caught up with her to see if she was hurt. They then talked about their engagement. Ono suddenly appeared, curiously asking about their marriage. Remembering Yonomori had said not to discuss their marriage at school, Byakuya changed the subject, denied dating Yonomori, and suggested Ono ask Konoha instead. Yonomori felt momentarily hurt by Byakuya's denial, but after Ono left, Byakuya asked if it was okay to talk about their engagement. Realizing she was upset by Byakuya's denial, Yonomori acknowledged she had feelings for him. Meanwhile, Mashiro told her that Konoha suspected she had come to the city for Kurenai Cho, which he found insulting. An eavesdropping Kurenai Cho only heard the word insult and thought Konoha had attacked Mashiro. Konoha learned from Ono that Yonomori and Byakuya were not dating and thought marriage was merely an adult fabrication, believing she still had a chance. Yonomori, hiding the true events of the previous day, only mentioned that Konoha was jealous of the close relationship between Kurenai Cho and Mashiro. Kurenai Cho joked that being too popular was a sin. The next day, Mashiro told Yonomori that Konoha knew about her engagement with Byakuya. Yonomori worried that Ono would question her again. Then Konoha appeared, pointing at Byakuya and declaring she wouldn't give up, which Mashiro misunderstood as not giving up on Kurenai Cho. Mashiro suggested that Yonomori bribe Konoha with a photo of Kurenai Cho to keep the engagement secret, even offering to help take the picture. However, Konoha caught them in the act and accused Mashiro of being hypocritically interested in Kurenai Cho. Yonomori overheard this and arranged a private talk with Konoha, asking her not to spread the news of the engagement. Konoha thought Yonomori was unwilling to marry, and felt she still had a chance with someone from her clan. She suggested Yonomori cancel the engagement, not to hurt others. This conversation unintentionally made Yonomori cry, leaving Konoha flustered trying to console her. At this moment, Kurenai Cho approached, and Konoha worried it looked like she had made Yonemori cry. Yonemori quickly explained that she just got something in her eye. Kurenai-cho actually believed her and immediately told Byakuya, who became concerned. Mashiro tried to take the opportunity to secretly photograph Kurenai-cho in an unflattering moment, but was caught by her. Meanwhile, Konoha was still puzzled about why Yonemori had been crying. At home, while baking a cake, Yonemori remembered Konoha's suggestion to cancel the engagement. She handed Byakuya a slice of the cake, awkwardly telling him that she had asked him not to discuss their marriage at school because she didn't want to cause a stir or be the subject of gossip, not because she disliked the engagement or him. Byakuya looked confused. Mashiro glanced at his brother's helpless expression and told Yonemori that it meant she liked him. Kurenai-cho, overhearing this behind the door, felt heartbroken. Byakuya was overjoyed but didn't know how to express it. At that moment, Kurenai-cho bumped into him, upset because the engagement had originally been arranged by their grandfather. But now her sister truly liked Byakuya. Since Kurenai-cho found out her sister was smitten, she found Byakuya increasingly irritating. Byakuya, feeling nervous under her scrutiny, seemed defiant to her. Mashiro encouraged Byakuya to stand up for himself. Byakuya blurted out, asking Kurenai-cho not to act like Yonemori's father. Despite disliking Byakuya, Kurenai-cho couldn't deny her affection for Mashiro. Byakuya was confused by the whole situation. Yonemori was also puzzled. She hadn't said she liked Byakuya, just that she wasn't against the engagement. Byakuya was disheartened by her earlier words, but reminded by Mashiro that Yonemori was shy. He felt satisfied knowing she wasn't against the engagement. Seeing the two struggling, Mashiro took their hands, making them look like a family to any onlooker. However, both Mashiro and the passing Konoha knew this was not a normal situation, likening it to an alien arrest scene. Yonemori gave Konoha a piece of cake and earnestly explained that she only avoided mentioning the engagement to avoid attracting attention, not because she disliked it. Konoha, staring at the cake, realized her plans as a rival in love were over before they started, but she still felt fondly towards Kurenai-cho. Byakuya was especially happy that day after what Yonemori said, finally remembering he was Yonemori's official partner. The animation studio, recognizing Byakuya's role, allowed him some spotlight, which was not easy. Seeing this, Mashiro and Momonai decided to give Yonemori and Byakuya some time alone. Byakuya asked Yonemori to walk home with him after school and if he could email her. Yonemori then received an emoji from Byakuya. Kurenai-cho, jealous, tried to get Mashiro to accompany them home. Yonemori caught both peeping nearby and scolded them. Ono found Konoha to gather information. Konoha, remembering her promise to keep Yonemori's secret, hesitated, but ended up telling Ono about it. The next day's school newspaper featured a story on Yonemori's culinary skills, highlighting her delicious cake. Ono felt the paper lacked sensational news and went back to Konoha for more information. Yonemori curiously asked Mashiro if Konoha proposed to Byakuya because she liked him. Mashiro clarified that it wasn't the case. They were just from the same clan, and it's rare for their kind to meet others like them. Yonemori is somewhat considered part of their clan since Byakuya shared half of his power with her, although she doesn't feel any special powers. Mashiro reassured her and suggested it might be best for her and Byakuya to show more of a couple's presence publicly. Kurenai-cho jumped in, proudly stating that she often wears matching clothes with Yonemori, which to outsiders could seem like couples' outfits. Byakuya looked envious, and Mashiro reminded him that for White Day, he could give matching gifts. Byakuya regretted not knowing how to knit a scarf but researched online and decided to shop alone after school, concerned about Yonemori's safety going home alone. Yonemori assured him and he went to the mall, only to be shocked by the prices. Mashiro told Yonemori that Byakuya's interest in couples' items was just his way of seeking reassurance. Yonemori bought matching handkerchiefs, a bit embarrassed, and gave one to Byakuya, asking him to keep it a secret from her sister. Byakuya felt completely fulfilled until Kurenai-cho appeared behind them unexpectedly. Yonemori then surprisingly pulled out 2 more handkerchiefs, giving one each to Mashiro and Kurenai-cho, causing Byakuya to be visibly shocked. While Kurenai-cho enjoyed the handkerchief from her sister, she was angry that the school newspaper only gave a small mention to Yonemori, yet worried that her sister's talents might attract too much attention and competition. Meanwhile, Mashiro showed Byakuya his rabbit handkerchief, making Byakuya realize that his and Yonomori's handkerchiefs matched, which cheered him up. Mashiro advised Byakuya to take the return gift seriously, or his CP stock price might drop. Ono decided to continue investigating Yonomori. Momonai noticed Byakuya seemed troubled about finding the right White Day gift, and suggested not picking something too expensive as it might distress Yonomori. After school, Mashiro quickly left, allowing Yonomori and Byakuya to walk home alone. Yonomori decided to make conversation with Byakuya, asking about his bangs covering his eyes, which he said didn't obstruct his view. Meanwhile, Mashiro sneaked out to buy blind boxes, but while returning via the rooftop, he bumped into Ono. Although she ran fast, Ono saw a shadow and mistook it for an extraterrestrial creature. Mashiro reported this incident back home, causing Byakuya to be unusually upset as their clan's exposure could mean they can no longer stay in the city. The next day, Ono told Konoha she saw a non-human creature, which Konoha immediately guessed was Mashiro. Ono declared her determination to uncover the truth, so she wouldn't investigate Yonomori for now. Byakuya, hearing this, reassured Yonomori that he still thought she was the best. Konoha, passing by, felt like she was fed dog food, feeling utterly defeated without even being in a relationship. Seeing Konoha walk away, Mashiro got an idea and encouraged Yonomori and Byakuya to go on a date, reminding Byakuya to treat. Originally, Mashiro didn't want to be a third wheel, but Yonomori thought it would be good to show her siblings around town, considering they hadn't explored much. Mashiro, also worried about being harassed by Kurenai-cho at home, finally agreed to join them. The next day, when Kurenai-cho learned that Yonomori planned to take the two out for fun, and that Mashiro even called it a White Day date, she broke down and adamantly disagreed. However, she was harshly overruled by the vice president. Yonomori and Byakuya accompanied Mashiro to see an alien movie, which Mashiro enjoyed, although Byakuya slept through it. Kurenai-cho was saddened thinking about her sister going out with another man, but her spirits were lifted when a cute little girl at the kindergarten called her Big Sister. Yonomori spent a long time playing with Mashiro, feeling they hadn't visited the places Byakuya would have liked. They agreed to go out again soon. A gust of wind then lifted Byakuya's bangs, and Yonomori noticed a scar under his eye. Byakuya and Mashiro quickly changed the subject, and Yonomori realized the scar might be related to her own injury years ago. Byakuya denied it, claiming clumsily that he got the scar by bumping into something. Yonomori didn't believe such an obvious lie. Byakuya insisted it wasn't her fault. He was just too weak to protect her properly. Later, Mashiro told Yonomori not to worry about Byakuya's scar, as they had never planned to discuss it. However, Yonomori couldn't just ignore it. The next day, after Yonomori made breakfast, she found that Byakuya and his sister weren't downstairs. She went to their room to wake them, only to find both the siblings and their luggage gone. Her mother thought they might have had an urgent matter since they were polite kids who would normally say goodbye. After they left, Yonomori carried on with her chores, but felt the house was much quieter. She wondered if Byakuya would message her, but instead she received a call from her best friend Momonai, informing her that the siblings had disappeared suddenly. Momonai asked if Yonomori knew where their hometown was. Yonomori did know their address, so Momonai suggested, since school was on break, that they could go check on them if she was really worried. Yonomori was concerned about leaving her mother and sister worried, but Momonai felt that being a little reckless occasionally was okay, especially since Byakuya was her fiancé. Deciding to act, Yonomori changed clothes and took a bus to their hometown, messaging her sister and mother that she was going to check on Byakuya. However, the mountain where the Komainu, spiritual guardian, lived was remote, and by the time Yonomori climbed the mountain path, it was evening. Meanwhile, Byakuya and Mashiro, having received a letter from Shiroyuki, rushed back to gather wild vegetables because Yonomori had mentioned wanting to try them. They forgot to leave a message and planned to return quickly after picking the vegetables. While gathering, Byakuya suddenly stood up, thinking he heard Yonomori's voice. Before Mashiro could react, Byakuya had already rushed out and soon found Yonomori in a cave. Only then did they exchange information and realize that their clothes and books were gone because they had taken them home to switch for new ones. Besides picking vegetables, they had come back to submit their report cards. Byakuya had left a message before leaving but forgot to mention they would return soon. Yonomori's message to Byakuya didn't reach him because there was no signal in the mountains. Relieved that both were safe, Yonomori relaxed, but then fainted due to a cold. Just then, a blizzard began outside, preventing Byakuya from carrying Yonomori away. He had no choice but to start a fire in the cave and asked Mashiro to stay and take care of Yonomori, while he went to call for help from their clan. As the fire dwindled, Mashiro decided to go out early to find more matches. Meanwhile, Yonomori dreamed of her childhood memories, where her mother and sister were very capable, and she didn't want to worry them. All she felt she could do was household chores. She feared being abandoned, so waking up to find the cave empty, Yonomori instinctively went out to look for the two. Just then, Mashiro returned with firewood and realized Yonomori was not in the cave. Byakuya also arrived with clan members, but Yonomori's footprints had been covered by the heavy snow. Mashiro felt guilty, fearing it would be his fault if anything happened to her. Byakuya tried to comfort him, blaming himself for returning late. Soon, Byakuya spotted a lost coat nearby and began a thorough search. Yonomori, disoriented, walked a few steps and fell through a weak spot in the snow, tumbling down a cliff. Byakuya, hearing the noise, rushed over and managed to grab Yonomori's hand just in time. Yonomori remembered a similar childhood incident where she fell off a cliff, and Byakuya was also with her. He lifted her up, and on their way down the mountain, Yonomori told Byakuya he no longer needed to hide his scars. She felt guilty and sorry, but also grateful that Byakuya had saved her. After all, they were engaged, and there was no need for secrets. Byakuya felt elated and brought Yonomori to meet the clan members. Upon receiving the news, Kurenai Cho and their mother borrowed Momonai's family helicopter to come over. On the way back, Kurenai Cho could tell from her sister's expression that something significant had happened the previous night, and she was visibly jealous. After the holidays, Yonomori and the others moved up to the 2nd grade and were again placed in the same class. When Shiroyuki visited, he brought wild vegetables, so Yonomori decided to make a wild vegetable hot pot and invited friends to enjoy it. Byakuya, as always, loved anything Yonomori made. Yonomori blushed, but didn't object. Frustrated, someone jokingly exclaimed, "Quick, bring the Civil Affairs Bureau over and let them get married already."